we are on a mission. No, not the transgender mission or agenda or whatever you want to call it, although that's what we're going to be talking about. A lot of developments around that lately.
Like, would you do something like that? Would you say no men in female sports?
Well, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that. It is an issue of fairness. So it's deeply unfair.
Deeply unfair. Is that the real Newsom? What's that slippery bastard up to? No, we are on a trout mission. You know, I've never caught a trout before. I've caught bass and plenty of other species, but never a trout, at least not freshwater. This year, I'm gonna rectify that. Hopefully, today. But it's got me thinking, what even is a trout? Will I know one when I see one? Can it even be defined? If you're feeling me, then you're probably a bit too high. Pause the video and come back when you're a little more clear-headed. If you think this pondering is ridiculous, then we're on the same page. And yet, as a society, we're collectively losing our grip on the basic concept of woman.
They exist in memory. I remember. You remember.
I do not remember. Only the disciplined mind can see reality, Winston.
Starting to suspect there are no trout in this part of Delaware. Moving on. What if this trans agenda has very little to do with gender? I mean, when you look at the powers who are pushing it, you gotta wonder. Something I do believe is worth pondering is freedom. Are we still living in a free society? Were we ever? I'll tell you, when I'm fishing, it sure feels like it. Of course, after I pay for all the licenses and everything. I suppose it's all relative. But if we do believe we're hanging on to a reasonable amount of freedom, how tenuous is our grasp? You know, watching the gender storyline play out in the mainstream media lately, I've been reminded of one of the most haunting lines in all of literature. Freedom is the freedom to say 2 + 2 make 4.
Do you remember writing in your diary, freedom is the freedom to say 2 + 2 = 4?
It's an insight by the protagonist Winston in George Orwell's dystopian novel 1984.
How many fingers am I holding up, Winston?
4.
And if the party says there are not 4, but 5, then how many?
5.
He completes that thought with, if that is granted, all else follows. I believe the point he's making is, all freedom fundamentally relies on the freedom to recognize and acknowledge basic truth.
I now recognize the representative from Delaware, Mr. McBride.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ranking Member Keating, also wonderful.
Mr.
I'm
Chairman,
sorry.
could you repeat your introduction again, please?
Yes, we have set the standard on the floor of the House, and I'm simply...
What is that standard, Mr. Chairman? Would you repeat what you just said when you introduced a duly elected representative from the United States of America? Please.
I will. The representative from Delaware, Mr. McBride.
Mr. Chairman, you are out of order.
We're living in a time and place where this concept is more relevant than ever, where the possibility of losing this freedom is more real than ever. This is a female volleyball match between Hiwassee Dam High School and Highlands High School in North Carolina. This is a biological male transgender athlete playing for Highlands High School. Recipient of the spike, promising female athlete Peyton McNabb, suffered various injuries, including impaired vision, partial paralysis, constant headaches, anxiety, and depression.
How many fingers, please?
What else can I say?
No bite so far. You know, the authoritarians pushing this agenda are far more clever than Orwell's big brother. Orwell's antagonist separated people from the truth using brute force, torture, and fear tactics.
5, 4, anything you like. Only please stop it. Stop the pain.
Our current aspiring rulers are taking a much more subtle approach, using one of mankind's greatest attributes against him: empathy.
Mr. Chairman, have you no decency? I mean, I've come to know you a little bit, but this is not decent.
We will continue this.
You will not continue it with me unless you introduce a duly elected representative the right way.
This hearing is adjourned.
And the challenge is not to the trans people, it's to the people who are not trans. That's what God is looking to see, how you treat people.
All right, still no bites. It's getting a little dark, a little cold. I got a long drive home, so I'm gonna take a few more casts and then I'll meet you back at the studio.
Transgender female athletes in women's sports, only 18% of the country says that they should be, in fact, allowed to participate in women's sports. Compare this to the opposition. I mean, my goodness gracious, 79%. You rarely get 79% of the country to agree on anything, but they do, in fact, agree on the idea of opposing transgender female athletes in women's sports. But it's not just the here and now, Laura. It's not just the here and now. What we're actually seeing is a trend on this particular issue, and it's going in the direction of opposition.
Welcome back to Shadow Records, independent media for the people. I'm Scott. Let's continue. First, we got to address the elephant in the room. I got skunked in 2 separate sessions. For the uninitiated, that means didn't catch a damn thing. This is why I don't have a fishing channel. In my defense, active fishing with lures, as opposed to live bait, is a sport that requires concentration. Unfortunately, so does shooting video. I think I spent about 25% of my concentration on the fishing and 75% on the filming. But mark my words, I will get that trout. Second, I want to make it clear, I have no problem with transgender individuals. It's the agenda I have a problem with, and we'll get into that. If you're an adult who wants to live your life representing a gender that doesn't typically align with your biological sex, have at it. I support your right to do so, up until the point where you're infringing on the rights of others. I believe I have a right to recognize and acknowledge basic truth. If you are a biological male living as a female, I may call you she or miss out of politeness. I probably will. However, if I choose not to, perhaps because you're wearing a dress with a full beard and I feel like you're yanking my chain, get over it. I also don't want you in women's locker rooms, bathrooms, prisons, or beating up on women in all-female sports leagues. Fair? And finally, I will never consider you an actual woman. So no, you can't win Best Actress or become the first female president. Sorry, we all have our limitations. With that out of the way, let's address a simple question. Is the transgender agenda over? Governor Gavin Newsom's comments appear to show a little weakness. And look at those CNN polling numbers. 79% oppose biological males playing in female sports. It is sinking the party. I personally know a lifelong Democrat, Trump hater, who did not vote for Kamala because of her support for this agenda. Sat it out. That's how big of an albatross this is around the neck of the Democratic Party. Seems like it should be a done deal, right? This is a good segue into why I call it an agenda. I don't believe it's an organic grassroots movement at all. That's why voter sentiment doesn't matter. KGB defector Yuri Bezmenov had it right when he said,
actually, there are no grassroots revolutions, period. Any revolution is a byproduct of a highly organized group of conscientious and professional organizers, but it has nothing to do with grassroots.
I would extend that insight to include major movements. This movement is the product of a highly organized group of conscientious and professional organizers working on behalf of an elite power faction. Its primary purpose is not to advance the rights of the transgender community. Many of the activists and politicians understand this, and the ones who don't are what Yuri would refer to as useful idiots. That's the only context in which this all makes perfect sense. Let's watch one of those useful folks in action. Here's Maine's Democrat Governor Janet Mills reiterating to President Trump that she will not comply with his transgender athlete ban.
Is Maine here, the governor of Maine? Well, I'm here. Are you not going to comply with it?
I'm complying with state and federal laws.
Well, we are the federal law. Well, you better do it. You better do it because you're not going to get any federal funding at all if you don't.
See you in court.
Every state, good, I'll see you in court. I look forward to that. That should be a real easy one.
Now that was back on February 21st. Has the ever-growing unpopularity of this position caused her to change course? Not according to Maine Republican State Representative Laurel Libby.
Governor Mills is trying to pull a fast one here. She has no intention of removing biological males from girls' sports in Maine. We heard this last week that the University of Maine system has said that they will comply with Title IX. But guess what? They've never had biological males participating in girls' sports. It's actually at the high school level, not the college level, where we've seen biological males participating in girls' sports in Maine. And Governor Mills, the Democrat majority in the Maine Principals Association, have no intention whatsoever of changing their policy.
Watch this take from Charlie Hurt. I think it's very typical amongst those who still believe this is some ill-conceived grassroots movement or a societal mass delusion.
Okay, so that's absolutely mind-blowing. So this is one of those issues that I think in 10 years from now, we're going to look back and try to have to explain to our kids that this was ever an issue because it makes no sense.
Charlie, it makes perfect sense when you realize its purpose. We'll get into that. First, a bit more evidence. Recent legislation to protect women's sports from biological men was broadly opposed by Democrats. How broadly? All but 2 Democrats in the House opposed the bill, along with every single Democrat in the Senate. I believe there are 215 Democrats in the House and 45 in the Senate. 2 out of 260 voted in favor of this protection. That implies that 0.7% of all congressional Democrats are opposed to biological men competing in women's sports, while 79% of potential voters are. Statistically speaking, does that make sense? Of course not. When you start to understand how this world works, and I didn't until recently, it's not hard to figure out why the Democrats won't completely abandon this issue despite it being a major loser. No, it's not because they're morally superior to their supporters, please. That couldn't come close to explaining this level of solidarity. No, politicians serve in exchange for power. They are motivated by 2 forces. Let's call them their voters and their controllers. Controllers are those who help them get into power and stay in power. Powerful people and groups who donate, pull strings, bribe, coerce, blackmail, align the media, etc. They take precedence over the voters because unlike the voters, they cannot be manipulated. They know what they want. They're the ones pulling the strings. And they control the means of manipulation, i.e. the mainstream media. They are seen as the wolves, and unfortunately, the voters are seen as the sheep. This is why the voters are being completely ignored on this issue. The wolves want this agenda to move forward, and are willing to bet that the sheep will come around. Now that we're talking wolves and sheep, it's the perfect time to check out this unbelievable gaslighting by the left's favorite shepherd, Democrat propagandist, Whoopi Goldberg.
I wanted to ask you, because there's been all of this debate about whether transgender athletes should be able to compete. And last week, California Governor Gavin Newsom said that he thinks that trans athletes competing in girls' and women's sports was deeply unfair. Deeply unfair. Deeply unfair. Part of the problem that the trans community is facing, and it's the same problem that women face, is if you don't know anything about our bodies, you don't know how it works.
Sorry, I gotta interrupt. Trans is not a new species. They have male or female bodies. Humans have been developing their understanding of male and female bodies for thousands of years.
Mm-hmm. So when you come in and you say, oh, you know, these are men, you know, competing against women, you're assuming that the women are weak and just can't do anything except be here. Have you seen female athletes? They know what they're doing. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Did you hear that? Do you see that deer in headlights look? That's the expression of a person who realizes they're being pulled into this epic grift and don't have the acting chops of Oscar-winning actress Whoopi Goldberg. Best to just smile and remain as still as possible.
So I'm not sure what's going on or why this is an issue.
Now think about it. You have a panel of 5 women, supposedly 2 Democrats, 1 independent, and 2 Republicans. If they were to match public sentiment exactly, 4 would be opposed to biological men in women's sports. So, is that what we see? No, not a single one of them voiced a lick of opposition. Odd coincidence? I don't think so. You know, when Isaac Newton saw the apple fall from the tree, he realized there must be a force causing it to do so. Although he couldn't see the force, he was certain that it must be there. I think we can apply that idea to this issue. There is clearly a force causing this phenomenon. We may not be able to see it, but we can be certain that it exists. Now, we know the force is not coming from the voters. That would steer the party in the opposite direction. We know it's not about appeasing the public for ratings purposes. The CNN poll rules that out as well. I think we can be confident, based on our understanding of politicians, that it's not coming from some higher moral character. So where then? To me, it's clear. It's coming from the top. It's coming from power. I don't want to go too deep into this, but leaked corporate emails showed that Phil Donahue, the most popular host on MSNBC back in 2003, was fired for voicing opposition to the impending invasion of Iraq. Tucker Carlson was the most valuable asset at Fox before he was fired. What does this tell us? It tells us that the mainstream media business is not about profits for the media company itself. We have to realize that mainstream media entities are not standalone for-profit businesses. They are more like the PR arm of the parent company or the hedge fund that controls the parent company. We can surmise that the parent company, General Electric, stood to make more money from the Iraq War than they would lose by firing a popular host. I guarantee you, the women of The View understand this reality. If the corporation doesn't want you to oppose the transgender agenda, then you'd better not do so, if you want to keep your very lucrative job. Hopefully I've presented enough evidence to show that this is not a grassroots movement, but an agenda pushed by power. Now we could ask the next logical question. What is its purpose? I've covered this in previous videos, and I'll continue to expand on it in the future. I believe it's a multi-purpose tool meant to disrupt our society in several ways. Its short-term goal is to drive a wedge between conservative, religious-minded individuals and liberals. It's a divider. It has somewhat backfired in that regard, as most liberals don't fully support it as well. Its medium-term goal is to frustrate conservatives, especially religious folks, to the point of backlash. This backlash will be used to justify hate speech laws. How do we know? We've already seen this playing out in other places, like Canada. Canadian father jailed after misgendering daughter lands win in appeals court. So great news on the appeal. But what did he do to justify several months in jail? He publicly referred to his daughter as his daughter. I want to show you a quick clip from a young woman named Clementine. She's someone who has detransitioned and is currently suing the medical professionals who counseled her. She was put on puberty blockers at 13 and had a double mastectomy at 14. She offers a bit of insight here.
I don't know how a child could consent to the loss of their fertility.
Yeah.
Children can't conceptualize that, and I think people don't understand that.
So you see, they want to make it illegal via hate speech laws for you as a parent to question your own child's treatment. And that brings me to long-term. Now, I believe one of its long-term goals is demoralization. If this agenda can be advanced to the point where conservatives feel like they can do nothing about it, where people with deeply held religious beliefs have to sit back and watch while their daughters are forced to change in locker rooms with biological males. Or worse, watch while their daughters and sons are counseled into making irrevocable, fertility-altering, disfiguring changes to their bodies. They will be completely demoralized and easy to rule over in authoritarian fashion. I believe this quote from that Canadian father really hammers the point home. One day your child is healthy, and the next day your child is on testosterone. I think that's the hardest part of it all, is being, I don't know what the word is, just, it's helpless, I guess. Just that sense of being helpless. How's that for demoralization? I think I'll wrap it up there. This issue doesn't appear to be going anywhere, and I'm sure I'll be covering it again. Thanks for watching, my friends. If you've enjoyed the content, please support the channel by hitting that like button, sharing your thoughts in the comments, subscribing, and sharing the video. See you soon.